Welcome to Interesting Enough. He is Trey. I am Nolan. Thank you guys so much for joining us once again. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you. Go ahead and like, subscribe, follow us, do all that good stuff. End of March Madness. We wanted to get on the pod and talk to you guys. Trey, what's going on? How you feeling?
Man, feeling good, man. End of March Madness. That's one more season down. So now it's just NBA. That's it.
Yeah, man. We talked last week about the women's primarily. This I think we want to talk about a little bit of both of the championship games and put a bow on March Madness and how it's going. But we had our bracket challenge, Trey, with us and the rest of our friends, and you almost won. We were talking about that before we hopped on here. You almost won the tournament. We did the ESPN bracket challenge like most people out there. Trey was in second place. I think you had like what 48 or 49% chance to win. It was basically down to you and somebody else, and then you lost. But you already picked Kentucky as your ultimate champion. So if UConn would have lost and you would have won the tournament challenge, how would you have felt about that? Because that would have been kind of backwards.
Oh, I'd have felt great because I would have been still getting me some money, so it wouldn't have mattered.
You're like, as long as I win the pot, I don't care how it gets done.
Hey, what? As long as I get the pot, bro, I don't even care, man.
For sure, for
But no,
sure.
on a serious note, like I am like it would have felt a little bit weird, like just like I know everybody else has been like, man, he picked the wrong champion. Like,
Yep.
how does he win? Especially when I picked Kentucky and they got out the first round. It was not even like they got out in the Elite Eight or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this was one of the rare years where I think everyone's champion, besides the couple people that picked UConn in our bracket, didn't even get to like the Final Four, like or at least even some of them. Yeah, because look, I'm looking at it. We had Houston, North Carolina, Duke, Arizona, a bunch of Houston. None of those teams made. I think one of them made the Elite Eight, I believe, and that was Houston, and that was it. So I mean, we kind of got it all wrong, but I think we already knew the eventual champion was going to be UConn. Let's talk about that first. I mean, we didn't talk about the men's bracket too much because the women's was just getting so much excitement and attention, and rightly so. So that's where we spent our attention. But I think we got to get on here at least talk a little bit about UConn. So for those who haven't followed, UConn won the national championship last year and then this year. So two-time back-to-back national champs. The first time since the 07 and 08 Florida Gators with Joakim Noah and that crew. How do we look back at this UConn team, Trey? Because we've talked about that they don't even have like a notable best player or anything like that. Even the Florida teams, they were kind of more exciting with like again, Joakim Noah was the guy, and you had Horford. Like, how do we look back, or how does history look back at this UConn team?
So I think the only thing that I think we're gonna look back at this team and realize that they have a really good coach, maybe even all-time great coach. And it showed in their sets that they were running, like when they were running their plays, they were getting great looks, it seemed like every single time down the court. So I think that we're gonna look back kind of favorably in that light. But I think another thing that we're gonna take away just in totality, this just looks like a really weak era for college basketball. So I think it's going to be like
Mm,
they won a lot, but they won a lot in a weak era because, like, if you name it, Duke is not the same Duke that it used to be under Coach K. North Carolina is not the same near North Carolina they were under Roy Williams. Syracuse is not the same. Villanova, they're not the same anymore. Like all of these great coaches are gone, and in this one and done era, it seems like it just hit this kind of crux at this point where it's like there's no more really great college players, well, college men players in basketball, let's just say.
yeah, I mean, I think with I want to say almost every NCAA champion on the men's side in recent memory. So let's just go the last 10, 12 years, something like that. They all at least had like one notable player, maybe a couple notable players, or even like you said, an all-time notable coach. This UConn team, and I think you said it best, it feels like a team I think we would appreciate later on because we may look back and be like, this was the start of Dan Hurley's Hall of Fame coaching career. Or we may look back and in a perceived weak draft class, we can look at a Castle or a Donovan Clingan, and they can go to the NBA and end up being great players. And just it's just something that we didn't expect. You know what I mean? Like we could look back on this and be like, oh, that guy Clingan that we thought was really good. We were talking about Zach Edey. He actually is really an NBA All Star now. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like it could be one of those situations. But in terms of the game specifically, the execution by UConn. I mean, it's just second to none. And the domination in this tournament, beating almost every team by double digits, is unheard of in a tournament. And so they not only did they win, but it really wasn't even particularly close. And every single game, even when teams made it close in the second half, they found a way to keep executing and keep pulling away. And they don't shoot themselves in the foot. So however talented or not talented they are compared to other teams, they're not making the mistakes. And I got to give credit to Hurley as the coach for, obviously in that staff, but you got to give credit to those players for being egoless in a way. And like they had a couple um 5 year seniors and stuff like that. And I wanted to ask about this too. Are we switching to this era of, because we're talking about this in women's basketball, so I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, but when we were kind of growing up, Trey, I would say when we were younger, it was more like guys were staying in college, and then as we got older, that period when we were probably what, like in middle schoolers, high schoolers, it was the one and dones, right? So
Yeah.
that's what we were used to seeing. But then we're seeing time and time again these teams being successful in college in the tournament, specifically with older players, older guards, older forwards. And I know we had the COVID year and stuff, so guys are even older than they're used to. My question is kind of, where is college basketball gonna go? Because if I'm a program, I feel like I've almost gotta design it in a way where I can retain guys or at least get guys from the transfer portal that are older if I want to win more. But then it also doesn't necessarily behoove you as far as the NBA talent pool is concerned to be having older guys that are trying to go to the league. So when you're recruiting, it's like, do you want to win and be a 4 year player? Or if I'm a 5 star, I'll just go somewhere and be a one and done. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to win successfully, in my 1 year in college. You know what I'm saying?
No, I get it. I get exactly what you're saying. And I think, at least I'm just going to talk from the team's perspective and the coach's perspective. I think it's going to get something similar to where they find like a nice middle ground. Like, let's just say Tennessee, for example, where you do have some nice young players, but then your best player, Dalton Connect, he was, I think it was a fifth year senior.
Yeah.
He was an older player that you got out of the transfer portal. And I think that's what a lot of coaches are going to start doing. They're going to start utilizing the transfer portal a lot more than they are now in college basketball. And I think they will have like one or two maybe young stars on their team that may only be there for 1 or 2 years, but then the rest surrounding talent, that would be older players that they got out of the transfer portal.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to go. But if let's use the big programs though, Trey. So if you're Duke, North Carolina, Duke's got a highly touted recruiting class, Cooper Flag, right? To name the main guy everyone knows. The goal should be still get the top talent, right? Like even over just getting guys in the portal. Because like I guess what's your goal? What is your goal as a program? I guess that's what I would come down to because I don't know what the goal would be. Do you want to be the program that gets a lot of stars to come there as freshmen? And again, that doesn't mean you can't win as freshmen, but it's very, very hard to do so. Or if you're a top program like Duke, do you kind of like do it in the transfer portal, or like you said, do a little bit of both? But a lot of these guys, so if you're Dalton Connect, for example, I'm not going to go to Duke. I'm not going to go to that program that I know other 5 stars are going to come in and probably start and stuff like that. I've got to go to a high major D1 program, but I don't need to go to, that type of program where they're getting that many recruits nonstop. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess that's the
No,
conundrum I see programs in.
it makes sense. But what I think also is going to happen is I think these programs are going to start, like I said, I think they're going to emphasize getting those one or two really legit young recruits from the high school ranks. But then I think the other 9 to 10 guys are going to start being, you know, third year players that have stayed at that program for a while, or they even got them at the transfer portal, maybe like older, juniors or seniors out of the transfer portal. So I don't
Right.
think Dalton Connect, I don't think he would have this issue with Duke, let's say 3 or 4 years down the road from now.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I gotta look at it that way. Now, real quick before we get off the men's thing, what do you think about Zach Edey pro going pro? Because that's kind of been the talk. He's been big and slow. We basically known him his whole career here, but now people are kind of talking themselves into him being like a first round pick before he wasn't going to be drafted. Where do you kind of see him fitting in the NBA landscape?
Well, at first, I wasn't even sure that man would get drafted, but I think he's shown enough to at least have an opportunity to get drafted. I mean, I can kind of see him being a decent rotational big, coming off the bench. I would just compare him maybe to like a lesser tier Valanciunas, like somebody that can get the job done in a pinch here and there, but not somebody that you can rely on. I mean, he seems a little bit too slow-footed, and in today's game, you have to be able to guard at least a little bit on the wing, and you have to be able to guard other big men on the wing. I'm not just talking about switching out into the guards, but I'm talking about other big men such as Jokic and Embiid. You have to be able to guard them a little bit on the wing, and I'm not sure if Zach Edey would be able to do that. But one thing that he does possess is just size. And I mean, I know we like to use that old saying that size doesn't matter, but in basketball, it does matter. And at 7'3", 300 pounds, I mean, he could just use that size to be a brute on the rebounds or just to be physically imposing on the offensive end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting because if I'm a team, especially if you're a team later in the first round, and a lot of these picks is kind of hard to hit at that point anyway. I'll take a Zach Edey, especially if I'm a team that's going to be contending and have to go up against the Jokic's or the Embiids or these bigs or the Brook Lopez Giannis tandems. I can at least throw a guy out there to get some fouls. You know what I'm saying? And he can at least give me some post touches where he can make it difficult to stop him. So I think he's really improved his stock by Purdue also going further, Trey, because like that was really the issue before when they were kind of not really a super athletic team around him, and then him as well. They got a little bit more athletic around him. He seemed to improve every year. So I think he's gonna get a shot. If Boban can get a shot, remember even Luke Garza, he's on the bench now in Minnesota. I know he's not as big as him, but the
Oh
point
yeah, I forgot
being,
he got a shot.
yep, yeah, yeah. So if he could be on the end of a bench on the roster, Zach Edey can not only be on the end of the bench, but I saw Luke Garza playing a couple of nights back. Oh, he's been playing because Karl Anthony Towns and stuff was out, so they needed another big. So I mean, he could definitely get his chance to play. So I mean, I kind of want to. I'm interested to see where he goes in the draft as well. But Klingham also is a little bit smaller than him, but he had his way against him too in certain points. You know what I'm saying? So like that makes it interesting as well too. So that's a good barometer scouts may look at and be like, look, this is who you most similarly would have to go up against if you're in the league. So, I mean, I think that'd be good to watch. But let's talk about the women's real quick. Iowa couldn't get it done. You picked Iowa, Trey. So I'm gonna throw it to you first. Yeah, you picked out, which wasn't a bad pick or anything like that. I mean, they just South Carolina was the better team. They were undefeated. That's kind of what I was feeling going in. There would be too much, but you know, I was nervous in the beginning just to see how fast Caitlin got off to a good start. So, what's your overall reaction to that game?
I mean, I just thought it was a great game. I'll be honest with you. I thought the whole women's tournament was better than the men's tournament, and that game in particular was better than the men's championship. But
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless, I'm not gonna, talk too long about that point. I do want to say though that Iowa, I mean, Caitlin Clark and the rest of those Iowa guards, they played really well, but they were just too small and too undermatched to keep South Carolina's bigs off the boards. And I mean, Cardoza, it just seemed like anytime she wanted to, she could get a rebound and just get an easy putback. Like there just wasn't a whole lot Iowa could do. And they just seemed as a team a lot less athletic than the South Carolina team. I just think that Iowa, I think they were punching a little bit above their weight class, and I think a lot of that had to do with Caitlin Clark and how well she had been playing. But I think they just finally met their match in that game.
I agree. I don't really have too much to add on specifically on the game. I will say with Caitlin Clark and that crew, they should be very proud of getting to that point with that team. I'm gonna put you that way. They have a pretty good team around her, but they played a lot of teams that I would say from top to bottom are a little bit more talented. But Caitlin and that crew and her supporting cast really played well most of these games in the tournament to get to this point. You don't just win off of one player, despite what social media wants to tell you. But I'm glad with South Carolina they got the dub. I'm happy for Don Staley and that crew. But South Carolina's a machine. I mean, they're undefeated for a reason. Like I know everybody wants to talk about Caitlin Clark and that crew, but this South Carolina team was undefeated. And let me just say this real quick, Trey, because I got to get off this. I got to get this narrative off my chest that I've been hearing. All you people on social media talking about people are hating on Caitlin Clark. No one's hating on Caitlin Clark just because we have a difference of opinion of where we think she's going to be at the WNBA level. Everyone's happy that she's bringing attention to the game. I think that's a universal thing. But people that are sitting here calling Diana Taurasi a hater and all these things because she said she'd pick Paige Beckers over Caitlin Clark if she was drafting a team, why has it got to be hate because she had a difference of opinion? If you guys that are actually complaining about this actually watched women's basketball, that argument between Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark is not that far off. Yeah, she doesn't shoot threes from 40 feet out, but she plays probably a more overall. well-rounded game than even Caitlin Clark. So people having a difference of opinion in Caitlin Clark, and by the way, also people saying, Trey, that it's not going to be the exact same way when she goes to the WNBA. Why is that hating? She's gonna be playing against grown women. That doesn't mean she can't get to that level, but also doesn't mean that she's just gonna walk in the WNBA and be putting up 30 and 10. Like this is a different level of competition. So people saying that that's hating, that's crazy to me.
No, and I completely agree with you. I mean, I've even had that same sentiment. I've shared with you where I said I think I might take Paige overall as a player as
Hmm.
opposed to Caitlin Clark. And that's not saying that Caitlin Clark is not a good player, but again, as you surmise, Paige just does a lot of things, I think, on the court a little bit better than Caitlin Clark. Obviously, Caitlin's a better shooter, but I mean, that's only one facet of the game.
Right.
And then the idea that she's going to do this when she first steps into the WNBA, I'm not saying it's impossible, but the likelihood is that she's not. I mean, we remember Steph Curry. We remember how he just dominated March Madness. I think it was in 2008. And then it took him a while to get his footing in the NBA.
Yeah, it takes people a minute, and I think Caitlin Clark is gonna be great for the game and growing the WNBA as well. But also, we can't pretend like, and the only reason I'm saying this, I don't want to sound like hating on Caitlin Clark, but everyone's just talking about as if Caitlin Clark, she did the heavy lifting for the game. But Caitlin Clark wasn't the only star that people were watching this year. People were watching Juju Watkins, people were watching Paige Beckers, people were watching Angel Reese and LSU. Y'all seem to forget about that too. So like, all of them collectively is what made the women's game get all this attention. And I hope it continues because a lot of these stars are going to go to the WNBA. And I hope people adopt teams and stuff and people watch some of these games, or at least at the very least, at least watch the playoff games. Trey, I at least watch the WNBA, some playoff games, and I do watch the finals. But I know I'm like an anomaly when it comes to that. But it makes the game exciting. And if I'm the men's college basketball, I got to figure out a way to get some stars into this game because people were watching this WNBA, or excuse me, not this WNBA, this NCAA women's tournament way more than the men's.
Oh, yeah.
And not even that, just the attention they got from social media and everything like that. Obviously you can't recreate Caitlin Clark stars, just from nothing. But we got to figure out a way to retain some stars or at least boost these players and get some excitement back into this game because nobody really cared about the NCAA men's tournament this year. I mean, I didn't even hear that many people watching the championship yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, if we're being honest with you, like it was even pretty quiet on that front. I watched it, you watched it, but it wasn't as highly touted as it was when we was watching Greg Oden play Florida. You know what I mean, or stuff like that. So it's just a different game. But I'm interested to see where the WNBA is going to take this because they've got the opportunity now. They've got the momentum. They got a big star coming in. And Trey, it honestly parallels the conversation you and I have when we're talking about the NBA and the next star. The WNBA found his next star. They found her.
Oh, I mean, listen, I'm hoping that it works out so well for her in the WNBA because I think she has the chance to really just kind of, I'm gonna be honest with you, be kind of like that Magic Johnson or that Larry Bird in the WNBA. And what I mean by that is, I mean, be that player that takes the WNBA to another stratosphere as Magic Johnson and Larry Bird did to the NBA. Be that person that kind of becomes the must-see TV of their era. And I think that she has the ability to do it. I think she has the charisma to do it, the personality. I just think it's just a matter up to her whether or not it works out. And she seems to have her head on the right shoulder. So I think it's going to work.
I certainly hope so. But before we get out of here, Trey, let's talk about J. Cole. I
Oh,
mean, you can't make this stuff up, man. I wake up a couple days ago. J. Cole is dropping verses, and he's throwing shots back at Kendrick Lamar. And then, honestly, it kind of makes sense in J. Cole fashion. Comes out and apologizes and said it wasn't sitting right with his soul, and he doesn't, want to go about it this way. Let me just say this part real quick, Trey. I do think J. Cole might have also. First of all, I don't think J. Cole just didn't. He's not scared. Like I don't think. I know the narrative is just funny on social media. He's not scared of like a rap battle. I don't think he's worried about Kendrick Lamar and lyrically or anything like that. But I do think he's probably seen rap battles go left, and not necessarily dangerous in a way, but like you just really have to like get gritty and find a lot of information about that person and take a lot of lyrical shots. And sometimes there's no coming back from that stuff when you do that. And I think that's just not the type of vibe that he wants to really live by, from what it sounds like. Even before this, doesn't really seem like a J. Cole vibe. And I think if he's courageous enough he knows he's going to take vitriol for that. He's going to, basically call himself out and be like, he made a mistake. I think that makes him even more real. Now, in terms of a rap battle in hip hop, it's not as fun, but I think it's super courageous. And I know I'm biased, but after taking the time, that's what I'm thinking about it.
Well, I think the opposite. And I'm a J. Cole fan and myself, but man, I mean, it just looked kind of weak. And he didn't have to look weak. That was the point I want to make. He could have
Which he
just,
did kind of admit it would look like.
yeah, and he could have just sat back and not said anything. And I don't think he would have got much flack for it. I think everybody would have been like, okay, that fits J. Cole's personality, his persona that he's developed over the years, where, he's not willing to the beef or any other that foolishness. He's just
You're saying after, just to be clear, you're saying after Kendrick dropped the first verse, he could have sat back and not said anything.
correct.
Right. Okay. Well, I think he just
And
made a
everybody
mistake.
would have been fine
That's
with
what
it.
he's saying. I think what he's saying is he's like people got into he said people got into his head and like
But when
gassed
you
him up
do
and
it,
made him
no,
to do it. Well, he said
I
people
get it.
gassed
But
him up.
once you do it, you don't take it back. At that point, you just live with the consequences.
But okay,
Because you
but
look real. Hold on.
okay.
In a very macho, I would say, I'm not gonna call it sport, but in a very macho arena, it just is what it is. It's full of machismo. He looks really weak right now.
I
He
think
just does.
okay. I agree to the public he looks weak today. But I think we'll look back on this and be like, it's actually not weak because it would be more weak to me if something wasn't sitting right with you and you just didn't like do what you wanted to do because of public pressure. Because basically, what would have happened was he would have felt the need to have not done it and regret it and go apologize, but he wouldn't have done it because it wouldn't have looked cool in front of everybody. So he's basically like, no, I really don't care what y'all think because I'm gonna come out and apologize and I know what y'all gonna say about it. You know what I mean? It's almost like the opposite effect because like most people would be too cowardly to admit something like that in general. So that's what I think. Like sport aside, just as the person. Now for the sport, it's less fun. For the sport of hip hop, it's less fun and it's less weak in rap conversations and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's not really that big of a deal. The man just said he apologized for it because he knows the angle is going to go down. Kendrick's going to go attack him. Then he's going to have to go even deeper. And you know how these rap beefs get. It ain't just going to be talking about just their catalogs at a certain point. You know how it's going to go, Trey. They're going to be start talking about personal shots. I mean, he already called the man 5 for 5. It's going to get worse.
It is, but my thing is, once you put it out there, once you put that out there into the arena, like you have to live with the results,
But
and
my
it just
question is
kind of seems
why?
because it just seems kind of it just seems weak and it seems two faced. Like it's like okay, you put your hand out there, you got slapped, and now you scared. Like it just seems kind of two faced, and it just seems really weak. It seems two faced a little bit too. Like
How
so,
is it
like you
two
did.
faced? You can't. You're not allowed to change your mind.
You are, but even when people change their minds, at certain depending if they this is a dish. It's not like you just changing their mind in an order at a restaurant. This is a dish. So just kind of like, so what do you like? Do you really think my album's boring? Do you really kind of dislike me? Like, what is it really?
Oh, I mean, I guess we can get the answers to some of that stuff as well. But to be fair with you, he did leave himself an out in those verses. If we being real, it's not like he trashed every single one of these projects and lied. Like he kind of like left himself an out. He didn't completely trash the guy. So if he would now Trey, if he would have went with the AK and completely destroyed him in a verse, I would agree he can go back. But he was kind of being nice in the verse and still taking like playful jabs. That's why I think he can come back from it because he didn't go out crazy. In my personal opinion, he didn't go out super crazy. He even told you he could give you more, but he's not going to. I just think the man's allowed to change his mind. And like,
I mean, he could come back from it, but I think people are just gonna look at him a little bit differently. I don't think it's gonna do anything like any kind of irreparable damage to him, but I just think it's also gonna be a thing where people are like, oh, okay, we might not take you necessarily as seriously as we did before because it's just again this is the rap game we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like I
oh yeah.
understand that people can take their opinions back and whatnot, but in the rap game, like for better or worse, it's never been like that.
And I guess to your point, the rap game is about cred, and that matters. So that's completely fair. But as long as he's a guy that doesn't care, if he says he doesn't care about the cred, then he don't care about the cred. You know what I mean? Like he's been kind of consistent about that as a guy that says he doesn't really care about a lot of this stuff. So I would think it would be more odd if a guy like Drake did that, like said something and took it back because Drake is known to be a petty rapper and he's been in rap beefs. This was already an out of body experience for J. Cole to begin with. You and I were surprised that he even responded in the way that he did. So we can tell that was kind of an out of body experience for him. So, but I mean, I was actually going to ask that too. So, what do you think this looks like going forward? Because I think a lot of this stuff really just blows over after like a couple weeks or so. Nobody's gonna really care. But I don't know if this is gonna be something that like every time he posts a song and Complex posts it, are they gonna be in the comments with Kendrick Lamar memes and stuff like that? Or like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what do you think this? in this social media world, because this is different now, but with the social media thing, how will his music be received?
So I think it'll still be received well. I think, like you said, you might see one or two people in his comments saying something negative like that, but I mean, that's just trolls. That's what they're gonna do. I think it kind of blows over. Like I said last week's pod, I think overall it just blows over. The only
Mhm.
thing that might keep it in people's minds is if Drake comes out and says something. But if Drake comes out and says something, he's not going to take it back. So then I think we're just going to forget about J. Cole altogether. And it's just going to be like, okay, this is a Kendrick versus J. Cole beef. This is the one versus two, whoever number two is. Like, you know what I mean? They're going head to
And
head. And I think J. Cole is just going to be kind of like left in the peripheral, kind of just looking in.
and to be fair with you, like I even said on last week's pod, this felt like more of a Drake and Kendrick beef anyway. That just J Cole was just basically in there by association. So this already kind of felt like that. And then Kendrick didn't really take a bunch of shots at like J Cole directly. This feels like more of just a group thing. Now I will say if Drake goes back at Kendrick, I mean J Cole's kind of off the hook, honestly. Like he's kind of off the hook at that point. But I don't think like I guess my question would be is I don't want people to be like he's not in the conversation of those three of all of the other two guys
This
and
doesn't
ones that
help.
it, okay, it doesn't help, but if he's still going to be dropping great music, I mean, I don't know. Like I guess that's the thing. If he's still going to be
It just
dropping,
doesn't help. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I see what you're saying if he's still dropping
yeah,
music, but like, man, this is just it wasn't a good look. Like it does not help. It's almost like I would use okay, let's use a basketball analogy.
okay,
It's kind of like when we everybody likes to pull up, the finals records, and then you have to look at LeBron's 2011 incident in Dallas. This is J. Cole's 2011 incident. Now, LeBron had a lot of greater works after that 2011 incident, but certain people still bring that 2011 up. And I think certain people are still going to bring the J. Cole backtracking up. Now, he might release his magnum opus next year. Like his greatest works might come next year or the year after. But I still think that for a certain audience, this is something that they're going to hold on to and latch on to.
you know what? That's a great analogy. Actually, when I think about it, because when you said certain people bring up the 2011 finals, I am certain people.
Yeah, I know
So,
you are.
so that's a great analogy. That analogy is going to ring specifically with me. So yeah, that absolutely makes sense. You could still consider LeBron the GOAT. You could do a lot of things after your career, but that's always going to be a little thing in the back of people's mind. That's a good point. That's a
It
good point.
is,
Now,
and it's even like it's one of the things like how I consider LeBron to go, but it's like I can't argue against that 2011. It's there, and I'm like, yeah, like it's just not a lot to say. And I think this kind of similar with J. Cole is like, yeah, that little blame is just there. Like it's just there. You got to live with it.
but can I say? Let me say one thing on the way out.
Yeah.
I almost feel like with players, even in the GOAT conversation, everybody always has a little thing. Like LeBron's got the 2011 finals. You know, Jordan, he's got the 6-0 finals record, but you got the small level of competition thing and the longevity. There's things that you could nitpick. When you look at Kendrick and Drake in these conversations, I don't does Kendrick have something to nitpick as of yet? Because when I think of Drake, I can think of him losing in the Pusha T thing. I can think of the Ghost Rider allegations, right? Like there's
Yep.
things that you can kind of like, you know what I mean, put together. When I think Kendrick, just scanning it, I don't know if he has anything outside of he just takes a long time to drop projects and like we don't see him on guest features where like we've seen J. Cole body a lot of guest features and stuff like that and he stays relevant. Is there something for Kendrick or am I just because he seems
No,
almost unimpeachable at this point?
he is. Like you have to nitpick, and the only nitpicky thing I could really think of Kendrick is somebody said, well, he doesn't have like the club bangers or like, yeah, he doesn't have the club bangers. That's the best word I could use for it,
Yeah,
like
that's a good
Drake
point.
does. But I mean, even then, that kind of feels kind of nitpicky. But I mean, like if you're talking about the greatest of all time, you might just need some club bangers. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like that
Yeah.
hippity
I mean,
hopping. I'm gonna use all these metaphors. Like it might not work all the time.
it's the Jay Z Nas thing, right? Like they're
Yeah,
both probably the same level of lyricists, but Jay Z got it. He did the Big Pimpins. He did other tracks where you could play. You got tracks for the ladies. Kendrick doesn't really have that. At
he
least not.
doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't really have. And again, he's still got a long career left. We're just talking about it now in 2024. We can be looking back in 2030, and he dropped them. But that's an interesting. That's a very interesting way you put it. I like it that way. But I'm actually let's cap it off at that because that is something that we want to clip. So I want to thank everybody so much for joining us once again. Again, like, subscribe, Apple Music, Spotify, all that good stuff. We got a lot more content to get into. Next week we will be talking heavy basketball. We're going to give you some NBA awards, so stay tuned for that. And of course, we'll keep up with anything else that happens in the pop culture with the hip hop specifically and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that as well. And on the way out, I will swing it to Trey.
Again, thank you so much for joining us this week. Really do appreciate it. Until next week, peace.